Rutland, Vermont, September 2000. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves through the quiet neighborhood of Maple Street. Rutland was showing its first signs of the coming fall, with patches of trees beginning their transformation into brilliant oranges and reds. It was the kind of picturesque New England scene that brought tourists to Vermont each year, cameras ready to capture the postcard-perfect landscape. Eleanor Winters stood on her front porch, a steaming mug of coffee warming her hands as she frowned at the house across the street. The Holloway residence, a well-maintained colonial with hunter green shutters and a wraparound porch, sat unusually quiet for the third consecutive morning. The Boston Globe remained rolled up at the end of the driveway, alongside yesterday's and the day before. "That's not like Catherine at all," Eleanor muttered, taking a sip from her mug. In the 15 years she'd lived across from Catherine and Marcus Holloway, she'd never known Catherine to leave newspapers uncollected. The librarian was meticulous about such things. Eleanor set her mug down on the porch railing and pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The temperature had dropped into the low 50s overnight, and the morning dew still clung to the grass. She made her way down her front steps and across Maple Street, her house slippers growing damp as she crossed the Holloway's lawn. "Catherine? Marcus?" she called, knocking firmly on the front door. When no response came, she peered through the living room window. Everything appeared normal inside. The antique grandfather clock that Marcus had restored still ticking in the corner, Catherine's reading glasses perched on top of an open book on the side table. A half-empty cup of what looked like tea sat beside it. A chill that had nothing to do with the September morning ran down Eleanor's spine. "Something's not right," she whispered to herself, turning to scan the quiet street. She hurried back to her house and dialed the Rutland Police Department. Detective James Harmon was in his 14th year with the Rutland PD when the call about the Holloways came in. At 43, his salt and pepper hair and permanent furrow between his brows made him look older than his years, the result of nearly 2 decades in law enforcement. "So both vehicles are gone?" he asked, standing in the Holloway's kitchen with Eleanor Winters. The house had been unlocked when they arrived, which only deepened the mystery. "Yes," Eleanor confirmed. "Marcus drove, a blue Ford F-150, about 10 years old. Catherine has a beige Toyota Camry, newer model, maybe 3 years old." Harmon nodded, making notes in his small pocket notebook. "And you last saw them when?" 4 days ago, Saturday afternoon. Marcus was working in his workshop in the backyard, and Catherine was pruning her rose bushes. We waved to each other but didn't speak. I left town Sunday morning to visit my sister in Burlington. Just got back late last night. Detective Harmon walked through the house methodically, noting details. The Holloway's home was immaculate, with no signs of struggle or forced entry. 2 coffee mugs sat in the kitchen sink, rinsed but not washed. A light jacket hung on the coat rack by the door. The refrigerator contained fresh groceries. "Any history of mental health issues, financial problems, marital difficulties?" Harmon asked, returning to the kitchen where Eleanor waited. "Not that I'm aware of," Eleanor replied, fidgeting with the silver watch on her wrist. They seemed happy. Marcus retired from his carpentry business about 3 years ago, but he still takes small jobs occasionally. Catherine loves her work at the library. They've lived here almost 30 years, raised their son here. "They have a son?" "Yes, Michael. He lives in Chicago with his wife and their 2 children. They visit a couple times a year, usually for Christmas and sometimes in the summer." Harmon made another note. "We'll need his contact information." As a rookie officer began taking Eleanor's statement, Harmon stepped onto the back porch. The property extended about an acre behind the house, bordered by a line of tall pine trees. A meticulously maintained garden occupied much of the space, with raised vegetable beds, now mostly harvested, and rose bushes along one side. At the far end of the yard stood a large workshop, its dark red paint matching the trim on the house. Harmon crossed the yard to the workshop, a substantial structure about the size of a 2-car garage. The door was padlocked. Through the windows, he could see a workspace that reflected Marcus Holloway's profession. Woodworking tools mounted on the walls, a large table saw in the center, various projects in different stages of completion. Nothing seemed out of place, yet everything felt wrong. People don't just vanish from their lives without a reason. By nightfall, the Holloway residence had been thoroughly processed by the Rutland Police Department. Their preliminary findings were troubling in their ordinariness. No signs of violence, no evidence of robbery, no indication of hasty packing. Their toothbrushes remained in the bathroom holder, prescription medications still in the medicine cabinet. Catherine's purse was missing, as was Marcus's wallet, according to Eleanor. It's like they just stepped out and never came back, Officer Peterson remarked to Harmon as they stood in the driveway, watching the neighborhood gather in small clusters on the sidewalk, speculation flowing freely among them. People don't just vanish into thin air, Harmon replied, his eyes drawn to the workshop at the back of the property. Check the bank records, credit cards, phone records. Let's see if there's any activity since Saturday. Michael Holloway arrived from Chicago the following morning, his face drawn with worry. He stood in his childhood home, surrounded by his parents' possessions, looking lost. I spoke to Mom on Friday night, he told Harmon, sinking onto the living room sofa. Everything seemed normal. She was excited about some new historical fiction collection the library had acquired. Dad got on the phone briefly, mentioned he was restoring an antique desk for someone in Burlington. Any chance they planned a trip and forgot to mention it? Harmon asked, though he already knew the answer. Michael shook his head. No way. Mom would never leave without telling me, and she certainly wouldn't leave the house unlocked. Plus, their passports are still in the desk drawer upstairs, I checked. Harmon nodded. Any financial troubles you know of? Health issues they might have kept from you? None, Michael said firmly. They're comfortable financially. Dad's pension, Mom's salary, and their investments give them more than enough. Health-wise, just the usual stuff for people their age. Dad's got mild hypertension. Mom takes something for her cholesterol. Nothing serious or sudden. What about their relationship? Any tensions? Michael looked surprised by the question. They've been married for 35 years. Sure, they bicker sometimes, but nothing serious. They're a team. He paused. You don't think one of them did something to the other? Harmon kept his expression neutral. We're exploring all possibilities, Mr. Holloway. Right now, we simply don't know what happened. 1 week after the Holloway's disappearance, the investigation had yielded little progress. Their vehicles hadn't been located. Their credit cards and cell phones showed no activity since the Saturday they were last seen. Their bank accounts remained untouched. The case generated significant local media coverage. Catherine's colleagues at the Rutland Public Library established a reward fund for information. Marcus's friends from the local Woodworkers Guild organized search parties, combing nearby wooded areas and abandoned properties. Detective Harmon spent hours reviewing the Holloway's phone records, bank statements, and interviews with friends and family. Everyone painted the same picture: a stable, well-liked couple with no obvious enemies or troubles. It's like they were abducted by aliens, Peterson joked one morning, dropping a fresh stack of leads on Harmon's desk. Most were from well-meaning citizens who thought they saw someone who looked like the Holloways in places ranging from Montreal to New York City. Harmon didn't laugh. 20 years in law enforcement had taught him one thing: when people disappear without a trace, the explanation is rarely benign. 2 weeks into the investigation, the first significant lead emerged. A highway patrol officer in Pennsylvania reported finding Catherine Holloway's beige Toyota Camry abandoned at a rest stop along Interstate 80, approximately 400 miles from Rutland. Harmon flew to Pennsylvania the next day. The vehicle had been parked in a remote corner of the rest area, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. Inside, forensics found nothing obviously suspicious. No blood, no signs of struggle. Catherine's purse was not in the car. The keys were missing. How long has it been here? Harmon asked the Pennsylvania state trooper who had discovered the vehicle. Hard to say for certain. The maintenance staff doesn't keep records of which vehicles come and go. Could be days, could be weeks. A trucker reported it because it hadn't moved in several days. The discovery of Catherine's abandoned vehicle 400 miles from home transformed the investigation. What had been a missing persons case now carried the distinct odor of foul play. Michael Holloway stood on the back porch of his parents' home, staring at his father's workshop. After 3 weeks with no answers, the strain showed on his face. Eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, shoulders stooped under the weight of uncertainty. Detective Harmon wants to search the workshop more thoroughly, he told Eleanor, who had brought over a casserole. The neighborhood had rallied around Michael, keeping him fed and supported during his extended stay. Your father kept it locked? Eleanor asked. Always. Said his tools were too valuable, too dangerous to risk neighborhood kids getting in. Michael twisted the key in his hand. I found the spare key where Mom always kept it in her jewelry box. Together, they crossed the yard to the workshop. The padlock opened with a click and Michael pushed the door inward. The familiar scent of sawdust and varnish enveloped them. Dad spent more time out here than in the house, especially after retirement, Michael said. running his hand along a half-finished bookshelf. Mom used to joke that she had to ring a dinner bell to get him to come inside. Eleanor moved deeper into the workshop, taking in the organized chaos of Marcus's creative space. Something caught her eye near the workbench, a dark stain on the concrete floor, partially hidden under a throw rug. "Michael," she called, her voice tight. Was this stain always here? Michael crossed to where she stood and moved the rug aside. The stain was substantial, about 3 feet in diameter, a deep, rusty brown. "I don't remember this," he said slowly, crouching down to examine it. Dad was meticulous about cleaning up spills. He wouldn't have left something like this. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Could it be? Michael stood abruptly. "I need to call Detective Harmon." The forensics team confirmed what they had feared. The stain in Marcus Holloway's workshop tested positive for human blood. Further testing would be needed to determine if it matched Catherine, but the discovery shifted the investigation dramatically. "We've been searching for a missing couple," Harmon told his team during a briefing. "Now we need to consider that we may be looking at a homicide and a fugitive." The search expanded. Marcus's truck had yet to be located. His description went out to law enforcement agencies nationwide. The FBI joined the investigation, bringing additional resources and expertise. As September gave way to October, the case of the missing Holloways grew colder, despite intensified efforts. The blood in the workshop was confirmed to be Catherine's type, but without a body, prosecutors were hesitant to file charges against Marcus in absentia. Michael returned to Chicago eventually, leaving his parents' home exactly as it was, in case they returned, a possibility that grew more remote with each passing day. The Rutland community gradually moved on, though Catherine's photograph remained posted at the library entrance, and local news outlets ran occasional updates marking time milestones: 1 month, 3 months, 6 months missing. For Detective Harmon, the Holloway case became the one that got away. The file he revisited on quiet nights, convinced he had missed something crucial. As the seasons changed and the vibrant Vermont autumn faded into winter's stark monochrome, the truth about what happened to Catherine and Marcus Holloway remained buried, a secret the small town of Rutland wasn't yet ready to unearth. But 20 years later, the truth would finally come to light, bringing with it revelations more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Rutland, Vermont, July 2020. The summer heat pressed down on Rutland like a weighted blanket, unusually oppressive for Vermont. Detective Meredith Chen wiped sweat from her brow as she stood in front of 47 Maple Street, staring at the colonial house with the hunter-green shutters. 20 years had softened its edges. The paint was faded, the garden overgrown, the wraparound porch sagging slightly on one corner. Chen had joined the Rutland Police Department 5 years ago, transferring from Boston with an impressive record in cold case investigations. At 36, she had a reputation for tenacity that bordered on obsession when it came to unsolved cases. The Holloway disappearance had fascinated her from the moment she'd discovered the file tucked away in the department's archives. "You sure about this?" asked Sergeant Daniel Powell, her partner of 3 years. At 48, Powell was a Rutland native who remembered when the Holloways vanished. "Harmon worked this case to death before he retired. There's nothing new to find." Chen shook her head, dark ponytail swinging. "Harmon didn't have the technology we have now. DNA testing has advanced. Digital records are more accessible. And sometimes, all it takes is a fresh set of eyes." They approached the house now owned by a young couple, the Clarks, who had purchased it 6 months earlier. The property had changed hands several times since the Holloways disappeared, its history always disclosed to new buyers, its reputation as the missing couple's house, never quite fading in local memory. "Detective Chen?" called a woman from the front door. Emma Clark waved them up. "We're almost finished with the kitchen demolition. My husband's in the backyard if you want to talk to him." The inside of the house had been gutted for renovation. Walls stripped to studs, floors torn up to reveal the subfloor. Gone were the antiques and personal touches that Eleanor Winters had described in her statement 20 years ago. The transformation made it easier for Chen to view the space objectively, without the ghosts of the past clouding her judgment. "We're turning the old workshop into a guest house," Emma explained as she led the detectives through the house and out the back door. "Alex is clearing out the last of the junk the previous owners left behind." Alex Clark, a bearded man in his early 30s, was using a small excavator to level the ground where Marcus Holloway's workshop had once stood. All that remained were the concrete foundation and a few scattered tools. "Mr. Clark," Chen called out over the machinery's roar. "Got a minute?" Alex cut the engine and climbed down, wiping his dusty hands on his jeans. "Sorry about the mess. The renovation's taking longer than we expected." "No problem. We appreciate you letting us look around," Chen replied. "I understand you've agreed to ground-penetrating radar testing in the yard?" "Yeah, of course. After what happened to the Holloways. Well, if there's any chance of giving their family closure, we want to help." He gestured toward the foundation. "I've found some weird stuff buried around the workshop. Nothing major. Just odd places to store things, like someone was hiding valuables." "What kind of things?" Powell asked, suddenly interested. "Old toolbox under a concrete slab that didn't match the rest of the foundation. Inside was just junk. Broken watches, costume jewelry, that sort of thing. And yesterday I found a metal box buried about 2 feet down near where I'm working now. Had some old letters in it, but they were too water-damaged to read." Chen's interest piqued. "Do you still have these items?" "Yeah, in the garage. Figured they might be important to someone." As Alex went to retrieve the boxes, Chen surveyed the backyard. The garden Eleanor had described was long gone, replaced by patchy grass and construction materials. The pine trees along the back of the property had grown taller, creating a denser barrier between this yard and the neighboring lots. "You really think we'll find something after all this time?" Powell asked quietly. "I don't know," Chen admitted. "But Marcus Holloway's truck was never found. His body was never found. Catherine's body was never found. Marcus never used his social security number or any known aliases after September 2000. It's like both of them just disappeared from existence. Maybe they wanted to. Maybe. But that blood in the workshop was Catherine's. And people who voluntarily disappear together usually leave some financial trail. The Holloways didn't touch any of their accounts." Alex returned carrying a plastic storage container. "Here's everything I've found. You're welcome to it." Chen thanked him and was about to open the container when her phone rang. She checked the display. The forensic technician she'd scheduled to perform the ground-penetrating radar survey. "They're here early," she told Powell. "Let's get them set up." The ground-penetrating radar technician was a young woman named Samantha Rivera, who arrived with equipment that looked like a high-tech lawnmower. "We'll grid the yard," she explained, marking sections with stakes and string. "The radar can detect anomalies up to about 12 feet deep, depending on soil conditions. If there's anything significant down there, disturbed soil patterns, large metal objects, cavities, we'll find it." Chen watched as Rivera methodically pushed the GPR unit back and forth across the yard, focusing particularly on the area surrounding the workshop foundation. The screen displayed real-time data and grayscale patterns that meant nothing to Chen's untrained eye. After 2 hours, Rivera called her over. "Rivera, I've got something here," she said, pointing to a distinct pattern on her screen. "About 5 feet deep, adjacent to the northeast corner of the workshop foundation. The soil density changes dramatically in an area roughly 6 by 3 feet. "A grave?" Powell asked, voicing what they were all thinking. "Possibly," Rivera replied. "Or it could be an old trash pit, utility access, or even a natural feature. But it's definitely man-made and relatively recent, last 50 years or so." Chen felt her pulse quicken. "Can we get approval for an exploratory excavation?" she asked Powell. He nodded grimly. "I'll call the DA. Given the history of this property, I don't think we'll have any trouble." The excavation began the following morning. A forensic anthropologist from the University of Vermont joined them, along with a crime scene unit and additional officers to secure the perimeter. The Clarks had agreed to stay with friends until the investigation was complete. The media caught wind of the activity at the infamous Holloway house. By noon, news vans lined Maple Street and curious neighbors gathered behind the police tape. Among them stood an elderly woman Chen recognized from the case file photos. Eleanor Winters, now in her 80s, supported by a middle-aged woman who looked to be her daughter. 4 feet down," called the technician operating the small excavator. "Going slower now." Chen stood at the edge of the deepening hole, every muscle tense. Beside her, the forensic anthropologist, Dr. Keller, watched with practiced patience. "Stop," Dr. Keller suddenly commanded. "I see something." The excavator withdrew, and Dr. Keller carefully descended into the pit with a brush and trowel. Chen and Powell peered down as she gently swept away soil from what was unmistakably fabric, deteriorated, but recognizable as synthetic material. "We've got human remains," Dr. Keller confirmed after several minutes of careful examination. "Adult, wrapped in what appears to be a tarp or plastic sheeting." A collective breath seemed to be held by everyone at the scene. After 20 years, Catherine Holloway, or perhaps Marcus, had been found. The excavation continued with painstaking precision, now entirely by hand. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the remains were fully exposed. A skeleton wrapped in the remnants of a blue tarp, sealed with duct tape that had largely deteriorated. Around the tarp was a layer of lime, a common method to accelerate decomposition and mask odors. The remains will be transported to the medical examiner's office for analysis, Chen informed Powell, as the body was carefully lifted from the grave. But preliminary findings from Dr. Keller suggest we're looking at a female victim, approximately in her 50s or 60s at time of death. Catherine, Powell murmured. Most likely. The height and build are consistent with her description. And look at this. Chen pointed to a gold band still encircling one of the skeletal fingers. Wedding ring. Cause of death? Too early to tell definitively, but Dr. Keller noted a fracture to the occipital bone, back of the skull. Blunt force trauma. As the remains were placed in a body bag and loaded into the medical examiner's van, Chen noticed Eleanor Winters, still standing beyond the police tape, her aged face streaked with tears. Chen approached her. "Mrs. Winters? I'm Detective Chen. Would you like to sit down?" The elderly woman nodded, allowing Chen to guide her to a nearby bench. "I knew," she whispered. "All these years I knew Catherine never left voluntarily. She loved her home, her garden. She would never have left without saying goodbye. You were close to the Holloways," Chen said gently. "Catherine was my best friend for 15 years. We had coffee every Tuesday morning. Shared recipes, gardening tips." Eleanor's voice quavered. "The last time I saw her, she was pruning her roses. She waved to me, smiled that smile of hers. I never imagined." She broke off, overcome. "Did you ever suspect Marcus might have harmed her?" Eleanor's watery gaze met Chen's. "No, never. They seemed happy. But people hide things, don't they? Even from those closest to them." Chen nodded, thinking of the secrets she'd uncovered in her years of detective work. The hidden affairs, financial deceptions, double lives that only came to light after tragedy struck. Was there anything unusual about their behavior in the days before they disappeared? Anything at all? Eleanor frowned, searching her memories. "Catherine seemed distracted that last week, less talkative than usual when we spoke. I asked if everything was all right, and she said she was just tired from cataloging a new collection at the library." She paused. "And Marcus? Now that I think about it, he spent more time than usual in his workshop that week. The lights were on out there late into the night several times. Did they have visitors? Phone calls that seemed to upset them? Not that I noticed, but..." Eleanor hesitated. "Please, Mrs. Winters, anything might help." "Anything?" "The Thursday before they disappeared, I saw Catherine at the pharmacy in town. She was at the prescription counter, seemed upset about something. When she saw me, she hurried out without speaking. It was so unlike her." Chen made a mental note to check pharmacy records, though after 20 years it was unlikely any would still exist. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. You've been very helpful." As the elderly woman was escorted back to her daughter's car, Chen surveyed the scene once more. The excavated grave, the workshop foundation, the colonial house with its faded green shutters, all pieces of a puzzle 2 decades in the making. Now they had the most crucial piece, Catherine Holloway's remains. And with modern forensic technology, perhaps they could finally uncover what happened that September day in 2000, and where Marcus Holloway had gone. The medical examiner's preliminary report confirmed what they suspected. The remains belonged to a Caucasian female, approximately 55 to 65 years old, with evidence of a healed wrist fracture consistent with Catherine Holloway's medical records. Dental records would provide final confirmation, but Chen was already convinced. "Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull," Dr. Levine, the medical examiner, explained, pointing to the X-ray displayed on his computer screen. "Single, powerful blow with a heavy object. Death would have been rapid, if not instantaneous." "Weapon?" Chen asked. "Something with a flat, relatively broad surface. A hammer is possible, though the impact area seems larger. Perhaps a mallet or small sledgehammer." Chen thought of Marcus Holloway's workshop, the array of tools he would have had access to. "Time of death?" Dr. Levine shrugged. "After 20 years, I can't give you anything precise. The body was buried relatively deeply, wrapped in plastic with lime applied. All of these factors affect decomposition rates. I can tell you she was dead before she was buried, and that burial likely occurred within days of death, not weeks or months. So consistent with her disappearance date in September 2000. Absolutely. And no other indicators of trauma? No defensive wounds on the arms or hands? None that I can detect on the skeletal remains. This suggests she may have been struck from behind, without warning. As Chen drove back to the station, her mind raced with possibilities. The most obvious scenario, that Marcus had killed Catherine and fled, seemed increasingly likely. But why? By all accounts, they had a stable marriage. What had happened in that workshop to turn a seemingly loving husband into a killer? Michael Holloway arrived in Rutland the day after the remains were discovered. Now in his mid-50s, with gray threading through his dark hair, he bore a striking resemblance to his father. "You're certain it's her?" he asked Chen, sitting across from her in the station's conference room, his voice hollow with grief. "The dental records confirmed it this morning," Chen replied gently. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Holloway." Michael nodded, his gaze fixed on the table. "All these years I held on to hope that maybe they'd had some kind of emergency, that they were together somewhere, even that they'd chosen to start a new life for some reason I couldn't understand." He looked up, eyes reddened. "But Dad killed her, didn't he? That's what you believe." Chen chose her words carefully. "The evidence suggests your mother died of blunt force trauma to the head. She was buried on your parents' property, near your father's workshop. Your father disappeared simultaneously and has never been found or used his identity since then. These facts are suggestive, but we're still investigating." "You think he's still alive, after all this time?" "It's possible. Many fugitives manage to live under the radar, especially if they have resources and plan carefully." Michael's expression hardened. "If he's alive, I want him found. I want to know why. What could possibly have driven him to?" He couldn't finish the sentence. "We're reopening the entire investigation," Chen assured him. "With your mother's remains discovered, we have physical evidence now, and forensic technology has advanced considerably since 2000. What can I do to help?" "Actually, there is something. We'd like your DNA sample to compare against any unidentified DNA we might find and—" Chen hesitated. "And what?" "We'd like your permission to go through your parents' personal effects more thoroughly. The house has changed hands several times, but according to our records, you put many of their belongings in storage after their disappearance." Michael nodded. "Most of it is in a storage unit here in Rutland. I kept thinking they might come back and want their things." His voice cracked slightly. "I'll take you there tomorrow." The storage unit contained the accumulated possessions of the Holloway's life together: furniture, clothing, books, family photographs, holiday decorations, all carefully packed and preserved by their son, a time capsule from September 2000. Chen and Powell spent hours methodically going through the contents, photographing and cataloging items of potential significance. Among Catherine's possessions, they found her day planner for 2000, with entries up to her disappearance. "Look at this," Chen said, pointing to an entry the week before Catherine vanished. "Appointment with Dr. Wilson, 2 p.m. "Her physician?" Powell asked. "Let's find out." Further investigation revealed Dr. Wilson had been an oncologist at Rutland Regional Medical Center. The hospital was reluctant to release records, but a court order granted them access to Catherine's medical file. "Cancer," Chen told Powell later that day, reading from the records. "Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 2 weeks before she disappeared. Advanced stage. Dr. Wilson estimated she had 3 to 6 months to live." Powell whistled low. "That changes things. Maybe Marcus didn't kill her. Maybe she took her own life and he buried her out of, I don't know, respect, avoiding scandal, and then disappeared himself." Chen shook her head. "Besides, the medical examiner confirmed blunt force trauma that's not consistent with suicide. Mercy killing then? If she was suffering, facing a painful death, possibly. But why strike her from behind? Why not use medication for a more peaceful end?" Chen frowned. "And that still doesn't explain Marcus's complete disappearance. No financial activity, no contact with his son, nothing for 20 years. As they continued examining the storage unit contents, Powell discovered a locked metal file box among Marcus's possessions. "Need to find a key," he muttered. Or, Chen retrieved a small lock-picking set from her jacket pocket. At Powell's raised eyebrow, she shrugged. "Hobby from college, don't ask." The lock yielded after a few minutes of manipulation. Inside, they found financial documents, property deeds, and a thick manila envelope labeled "Insurance." "Life insurance policy," Chen said, scanning the documents inside. "On Catherine. $500,000 death benefit, double indemnity for accidental death. Taken out 5 years before she disappeared. Not unusual for a couple their age," Powell noted. "No, but look at this." Chen pointed to a clause highlighted in the policy. Exclusions include suicide within 2 years of policy issuance and terminal illness diagnosed before death. Powell's expression shifted as understanding dawned. If Catherine died of cancer, the policy wouldn't pay out. But if she died accidentally, exactly, $1 million would be a powerful motive. Chen continued reading. The beneficiary is listed as Marcus Holloway, but there's no record of any claim being filed after her disappearance, because he knew her body was buried in their yard. He couldn't risk an investigation. Chen nodded slowly. So what did he do? Where did he go with no money, no identity, no vehicle except Catherine's Camry, which was found abandoned? The answer came the next day. Buried deep in the box of Marcus's personal documents, a second passport in the name of Martin Harrison, with Marcus's photo. The issue date was 3 years before the Holloways disappeared. A false identity, Chen breathed, staring at the discovery. Established well in advance. This wasn't a crime of passion or a hasty decision. He planned this. The investigation accelerated. With the passport details, they traced Martin Harrison to Florida, where he had purchased property in a cash transaction 1 month after the Holloways disappeared. But the trail went cold in 2005, when the property was sold, and Martin Harrison seemingly vanished as completely as Marcus Holloway had. He's changed identities again, Chen theorized, probably multiple times over the years. If he's even still alive, Powell pointed out, he'd be in his 80s now. Chen wasn't ready to give up. The DNA sample from Michael might help. If Marcus has been arrested at any point, even for something minor, his DNA might be in the system under whatever name he's using. 3 weeks after Catherine's remains were discovered, Chen received a call from the FBI lab that had been processing DNA evidence from the burial site and workshop foundation. "We got a hit," the technician informed her. DNA from a blood sample taken from the workshop in 2000, previously confirmed as Catherine Holloway's, shows familial markers consistent with a suspect in a 2018 assault case in Arizona. Chen's heart raced. Marcus Holloway? No, the suspect is significantly younger. According to records, he's 46 years old, name of Thomas Harrison, but the genetic markers suggest he's likely the son or nephew of your missing person. Son? Chen repeated, confused. Michael Holloway is the only child we know of, and his DNA doesn't match this profile. Then either your records are incomplete, or Marcus Holloway had another child you don't know about. The revelation sent Chen back to the beginning. She re-examined every statement, every piece of evidence from the original investigation. She interviewed Eleanor Winters again, this time with more specific questions about the Holloway's marriage and social connections. Catherine ever mention any suspicions about Marcus? Chen asked. Any concerns about his fidelity? Eleanor frowned. No, never. They seemed devoted to each other. Why do you ask? Just covering all bases, Chen replied non-committally. But privately, a new theory was forming in her mind, one that might explain not only Catherine's murder, but the elaborate planning behind Marcus's disappearance. Thomas Harrison proved difficult to locate. After the 2018 assault charge in Phoenix, for which he had received probation, he had moved without updating his address with authorities. His probation officer hadn't seen him in months. Chen flew to Phoenix with Powell to investigate in person. They visited Thomas's last known address, spoke with neighbors, and eventually tracked down his ex-girlfriend, who revealed he had mentioned heading to New Mexico for a construction job. In Albuquerque, they finally caught a break. Thomas Harrison was working for a small construction company under his own name. His employer provided an address, a modest apartment on the city's west side. The arrest was uneventful. Thomas Harrison, a weathered man with dark hair graying at the temples, offered no resistance when Chen and local police officers arrived at his door. "Been wondering when you'd show up," he said calmly as Chen introduced herself. "Figured it was just a matter of time after they found Catherine." His casual reference to Catherine by name confirmed Chen's suspicions. This man knew about the Holloway case, knew details that hadn't been widely reported. "We need to ask you some questions about Marcus Holloway," Chen told him as they drove to the local police station. Thomas smiled thinly. "You mean my father? Better ask quickly. Cancer's not leaving me much time." In the interrogation room, Thomas Harrison revealed the final pieces of the puzzle that had eluded investigators for 20 years. "Marcus Holloway was my biological father," he explained, his voice raspy from years of smoking. "My mother was a woman he had an affair with in the late 1970s. He paid child support secretly for years, visited occasionally when he told Catherine he was on business trips." "Did Catherine know about you?" Chen asked. Thomas shook his head. Not until the end. She found out somehow. Bank statements maybe, or overheard a phone call. Confronted him about it in September 2000. And he killed her? That's what he told me. Said it was an accident. They argued in his workshop. She threatened to divorce him. He panicked and hit her with a mallet. Once he realized what he'd done, he knew his life as Marcus Holloway was over. Chen leaned forward. So he contacted you? Called me that night frantic. I was living in Pennsylvania then. He drove Catherine's car to meet me, buried her body before he left. We abandoned her car at that rest stop. Then I drove him to Florida, where he had already established his new identity as Martin Harrison. And the life insurance, the $1 million? Thomas laughed bitterly. Never collected. Too risky. He had some savings, sold some valuable tools before he left. Lived modestly as Martin. When that identity became too risky, I helped him create another, Robert Walsh. He moved to Arizona near me. Where is he now? Chen asked, though she already suspected the answer. Died in 2017, Alzheimer's. Didn't even know who I was at the end. Thomas's expression hardened. Buried him myself. No funeral, no marker. Figured that was fitting, considering what he did to Catherine. Why come forward now? Why tell us all this? Thomas gestured to his thin frame. Pancreatic cancer. Ironic, isn't it? Same thing Catherine had. I've got weeks, maybe a month. Figured I'd clear my conscience before I go. As Thomas Harrison signed his confession, detailing his role as accessory after the fact in Catherine Holloway's murder, and the 20-year deception that followed, Chen felt the mixed emotions that often accompanied the resolution of cold cases. Satisfaction at uncovering the truth, sadness for the tragedy that had unfolded, and a lingering sense that justice so long delayed could never be truly complete. Michael Holloway received the news of his father's crimes and death with quiet dignity. All these years I never knew about Thomas, he told Chen when she delivered her final report. A half-brother I never met. Would you like his contact information? Chen offered. He doesn't have much time left. Michael hesitated, then nodded. Yes, despite everything. He's family, the only family I have left now. As summer faded into autumn in Rutland, Vermont, Catherine Holloway was finally laid to rest properly, her grave marked with her name and the simple epitaph, beloved mother, friend, and librarian, finally at peace. The mystery that had haunted the town for 20 years was solved at last, revealing how secrets buried in life had led to a body buried in death, and how justice, though delayed, had finally been served. In the end, the truth had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to dig beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect marriage to uncover the deception, betrayal, and violence that had ended with a makeshift grave beside a workshop where a craftsman had built beautiful things with the same hands that had taken his wife's life. Albuquerque, New Mexico, August 2020. The hospital room was bathed in the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, the rhythmic beeping of monitoring equipment providing a constant reminder of mortality. Thomas Harrison lay propped against white pillows, his once robust frame now hollow and angular beneath the thin blanket. The ravages of late-stage pancreatic cancer had transformed him in mere weeks. Sunken cheeks, jaundiced skin, eyes that seemed too large for his face. Michael Holloway stood in the doorway, a stranger observing the half-brother he'd never known existed until a week ago. At 55, Michael's resemblance to their father was striking. The same square jaw and straight nose, the same way of standing with weight shifted slightly to one side. Yet where Michael's expression carried a lifetime of questions, Thomas's face held the resigned calm of a man who had made his peace with the past. "You came," Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. Michael stepped into the room, setting a small duffel bag on a nearby chair. "Detective Chen said you don't have much time. Days, maybe. The doctors aren't optimistic." Thomas attempted a smile that came out as a grimace. "I didn't think you'd want to meet me, not after everything." "I'm still not sure I do," Michael admitted, settling into the chair beside the bed. "But I've spent 20 years wondering what happened to my parents. You're the only one left who knows the whole story." Thomas nodded weakly. "What do you want to know?" "Everything from the beginning." Michael leaned forward. "Who was your mother? When did the affair start?" Thomas closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. "Her name was Angela Mercer. She worked at a hotel in Burlington where Dad sometimes stayed when he had carpentry jobs up that way. This was 1973, 74, before you were born." He paused, reaching for a cup of water on the bedside table. Michael helped him take a sip before he continued. The affair lasted a few months. When she got pregnant, she told him. He offered to pay support, but made it clear he wouldn't leave Catherine. Angela accepted the arrangement. So you grew up knowing Marcus was your father? Yes and no. My mother married when I was 3. Good man named Richard Harrison. He adopted me legally, gave me his name. I called him Dad, but I knew Marcus was my biological father. He visited a couple times a year, always explained as Mom's old friend from Vermont. Michael's jaw tightened. While I was growing up thinking I had the perfect family. Your family was real, Thomas countered, a flash of defensiveness cutting through his weakness. Marcus and Catherine loved each other. They loved you. What he had with my mother was different. Different enough that he killed my mother when she found out about it, Michael said, bitterness evident in every word. Thomas met his gaze steadily. I've had 20 years to think about what happened that day. I believe him when he said it wasn't premeditated. The Marcus I knew wasn't a violent man. Tell me what happened. His version of it. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, wincing at the movement. It was a Thursday when Catherine found out. She was at the pharmacy picking up a prescription, probably related to her cancer diagnosis. The clerk accidentally gave her a receipt for a previous prescription Marcus had filled, a heart medication being sent to an address in Pennsylvania. My address. So she put it together. She knew there was no legitimate reason for Marcus to be shipping medication to Pennsylvania. She confronted him that night, demanded to know who lived at that address. He tried to deflect, but Catherine was smart. She kept pushing until he admitted the truth, about my mother, about me. Michael tried to imagine the scene. His mother, already processing her own terminal diagnosis, discovering her husband's decades-long deception. And then, according to Marcus, she was devastated, furious, said their entire marriage had been built on lies. She threatened to expose him to everyone, to you, to their friends, to the whole town. Said she'd file for divorce immediately, make sure everyone knew what kind of man he really was. Thomas paused, his breathing labored. They were in his workshop. He said she turned to leave, to call you right then and tell you everything. He grabbed a mallet from his workbench and he swung. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Michael closed his eyes, a wave of nausea washing over him as he pictured his father striking his mother from behind. The same hands that had taught him to throw a baseball, built his childhood treehouse, gently fixed Catherine's garden trellis each spring. One blow? He finally asked, his voice hollow. Thomas nodded. To the back of the head she fell immediately. He said he knew right away she was gone. No pulse, no breathing. And then he called you. Not immediately. First, he panicked, tried to revive her. When he realized she was dead, he sat there for hours trying to figure out what to do. Thomas's gaze drifted to the window, where afternoon sunlight cast long shadows. It was nearly midnight when he called me. I'd only spoken to him a few times that year. When I answered and heard his voice, the terror, the shock, I knew something terrible had happened. Why did he call you and not emergency services or me? Because he was a coward, Thomas said plainly. He was afraid of prison, afraid of facing what he'd done. And he hesitated. And what? And he knew I had experience with covering things up. I'd been in trouble with the law before. Theft, fraud. I'm not proud of it. But Marcus knew I understood how to disappear. Michael stood abruptly, pacing the small room. So you helped him get away with murder. I didn't know she was murdered when I agreed to help, Thomas protested, though his voice lacked conviction. He told me it was an accident, that they'd argued and she'd fallen and hit her head. I only learned the full truth years later. But you still helped him bury her body. No, he did that before he left Vermont. He buried her that night, then cleaned the workshop as best he could. The next morning, he packed a bag, took some cash he'd been keeping in a safe, and drove Catherine's car to Pennsylvania. Met me at a truck stop near Scranton, and my mother had just been diagnosed with cancer. Michael's voice broke slightly. Did he tell you that? Thomas's expression registered genuine surprise. No, I didn't know about her diagnosis until Detective Chen mentioned it. Marcus never said a word about Catherine being sick. Michael absorbed this, wondering what it meant. Had his father not known about the diagnosis? Or had he known and still chosen to strike her down, rather than let her expose his decades of deception? What happened after he met you in Pennsylvania? He asked, returning to the chair beside Thomas's bed. We abandoned Catherine's car at that rest stop, figured it would be found eventually, create confusion about where they'd gone. Then I drove him to Florida. He already had the Martin Harrison identity established. Passport, Driver's license, social security card. He'd been planning an exit strategy for years, though I don't think he ever expected to use it this way. How did he get those documents? Thomas gave a weak smile. I told you. I had connections from my less reputable days. I'd helped him set up the identity 3 years earlier when he started talking about possibly disappearing someday. Why would he want to disappear if everything was so perfect in his life? Michael asked bitterly. The pressure of maintaining the lie, I think. The constant fear of being discovered. Living 2 separate lives. The respectable carpenter and family man in Vermont, and the absent father who occasionally visited his illegitimate son. It wears on a person. Michael thought about the father he had known. Quiet, sometimes distant, but never visibly stressed or unhappy. How well had he really known the man? The life insurance policy, Michael said suddenly. Detective Chen mentioned a policy on my mother's life with $1 million payout for accidental death. Thomas nodded. Another contingency he'd set up, but he never collected. Too risky to file a claim when there was no body and the death benefit wouldn't pay out for cancer anyway. He lived off his savings, sold some valuable tools before leaving Vermont, and took odd carpentry jobs in Florida for cash. As Martin Harrison. Yes, he lived in Naples for about 5 years. Small house, kept to himself mostly. He was careful with money, lived simply. And then he got nervous. A former colleague from Vermont vacationed nearby, almost recognized him at a hardware store. That's when we created the Robert Walsh identity and moved him to Arizona. Michael shook his head in disbelief. All those years I searched for them, hired private investigators posted on missing persons websites, checked unidentified remains databases regularly. I grieved them both, never knowing my father was alive, living another life, being protected by you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Thomas said quietly. What we did was unforgivable. I'm just trying to give you the answers you've been seeking. Michael studied his half-brother's face, the family resemblance now unmistakable despite the ravages of disease. What was he like all those years? Did he ever express remorse? Every day. He kept a photo of you and Catherine in his wallet until the day he died. When the Alzheimer's started taking hold around 2015, he would confuse me for you sometimes, ask when you were coming to visit. Near the end, he'd have moments of lucidity where he'd break down completely, begging Catherine's forgiveness. But not enough remorse to turn himself in. Not enough to let me know he was alive, to let me bury my mother properly. Michael's voice hardened. He let me spend 20 years wondering, searching, grieving both of them. Yes, Thomas agreed simply. Like I said, he was a coward. We both were. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 2 decades of deception hanging between them. Outside the hospital room, life continued. Nurses chatted at their station. Visitors came and went. A cleaning cart rattled past the door. I have something for you, Thomas finally said, gesturing weakly toward the small closet in the corner. Top shelf, black notebook. Michael retrieved the notebook. A leather-bound journal, well worn, its pages yellowed with age. What is this? Marcus's journal. He started keeping it the day after Catherine. Wrote in it almost daily until the Alzheimer's made it impossible. He asked me to give it to you if you were ever found. Michael held the journal gingerly as though it might burn his fingers. Why would I want this? It won't excuse what he did, Thomas said. Nothing could, but it might help you understand. And there are things in there about Catherine. Memories, details of their life together that you might want to have. Michael slipped the journal into his jacket pocket without opening it. Is there anything else? Any other secrets I should know? Thomas's gaze drifted again to the window. Just one. When Marcus died, I scattered his ashes at a place he talked about often. A lake in Vermont where he and Catherine took you camping every summer. He said those were the happiest days of his life. Michael's throat constricted. Lake Champlain. We went there every August until I left for college. That's the one. I scattered him there at sunrise. No ceremony, no marker. Just returned him to the place he loved most, with the people he loved most. Thomas's voice had grown weaker, fatigue evident in every word. For whatever it's worth, in his final lucid moments, he asked me to tell you he was sorry. Not just for what he did to Catherine, but for abandoning you. Michael stood, unable to process the conflicting emotions surging through him. Rage at his father's betrayal, grief for his mother's suffering, and a confused mix of pity and resentment toward the dying man before him, the half-brother who had enabled their father's escape from justice. I should go, he said stiffly. Thomas nodded, his eyes drifting closed. I understand. Thank you for coming, Michael. For what it's worth, He always said you were the best of him, the man he wished he'd had the courage to be. Michael paused at the door, turning back. Did you have children, Thomas? A family? A daughter? Haven't seen her in years. Her mother took her when she was small, moved to California. Another failure in a life full of them. Thomas opened his eyes, meeting Michael's gaze one final time. We're not all our father's sons, Michael. You proved that. Without another word, Michael left the hospital room, the weight of his father's journal heavy in his pocket. Outside, the New Mexico sun blazed in a cloudless sky, the heat a physical presence against his skin. He sat in his rental car for nearly an hour, staring at the hospital entrance, before finally opening the journal to its first entry, dated September 19th, 2000, 3 days after Catherine disappeared. Today I buried not just Catherine, but Marcus Holloway. The entry began in his father's familiar, precise handwriting. Both gone now, though only one lies beneath the earth. Rutland, Vermont, September 2020. Detective Meredith Chen sat across from Michael Holloway in the conference room of the Rutland Police Department. Between them on the table lay Marcus Holloway's journal, now logged into evidence after Michael had turned it over upon his return from New Mexico. The journal corroborates everything Thomas Harrison told you, Chen confirmed, closing the case file. The accidental discovery of the prescription receipt, the confrontation in the workshop, the call to Thomas, the burial that night. Marcus documented it all, including details only the killer would know, like the blue tarp and lime. Michael said numbly. The past weeks had left him hollow, emptied of emotion. Exactly. He also wrote about Catherine's threats to expose him, her intention to call you immediately. The forensic evidence supports his account of a single blow to the back of the head as she turned to leave. Chen paused. There's one aspect that doesn't add up, though. Michael looked up. What's that? According to the journal, Marcus claims he didn't know about Catherine's cancer diagnosis until after her death, when he went through her things before leaving and found the doctor's report. Do you believe him? Chen considered the question. It's possible. Medical privacy laws would have prevented Dr. Wilson from discussing her diagnosis with Marcus without Catherine's consent. And according to Eleanor Winters, Catherine seemed secretive about her pharmacy visit. Why would she hide a terminal diagnosis from her husband? People process such news differently. She might have been in denial or wanted to explore treatment options before worrying him. Or she already suspected something was wrong in their marriage, Michael finished. Already had doubts about him. Chen nodded. It's impossible to know for certain. What we do know is that Marcus killed Catherine, buried her body, and fled with Thomas's help. Thomas assisted after the fact, making him an accessory, though he'll never face charges given his condition. Has he? Michael couldn't finish the question. Thomas passed away 3 days ago, Chen confirmed gently. The hospital notified us this morning. Michael absorbed this news with a slight nod, another thread of the tangled story severed. So it's over. Case closed. From a legal perspective, yes. Marcus is deceased and Thomas can no longer be prosecuted. Catherine's remains have been positively identified and released for proper burial. All evidence points to the scenario outlined in the journal and Thomas's confession. Chen closed her notebook. But I suspect for you, the case will never truly be closed. Michael glanced out the conference room window, where leaves were just beginning to turn, hinting at the vibrant Vermont autumn to come. 20 years of searching only to discover my father was a liar, a cheater, and a murderer. My mother died alone, terrified, betrayed by the man she loved, and I had a half-brother I never knew existed. He turned back to Chen. Closure isn't possible with revelations like these, just a different kind of uncertainty. Chen understood. In her years working cold cases, she'd seen how answers often brought their own form of pain, reopening wounds survivors had worked hard to heal. What will you do now? She asked. Bury my mother properly. Then, he hesitated. I found something else in my father's journal, something I need to verify. Anything I can help with? Michael reached into his pocket and withdrew a small photograph yellowed with age. This was pressed between the pages. It's my mother, pregnant. With me, I assumed. But the date on the back is 1968. I wasn't born until 1970. Chen studied the photograph. A younger Catherine Holloway, her hand resting on a visibly pregnant belly, standing beside a Christmas tree. A previous pregnancy? She suggested. That's what I thought. But there's no record of another child in any family documents. No mention by relatives or friends. I asked Eleanor, and she said she'd never heard anything about a previous child. Miscarriage, perhaps, or stillbirth, possibly. But there's an entry in the journal dated October 2003 that mentions wondering where Jennifer is now, if she ever learned the truth about her parents. No context, no explanation. Michael's expression was troubled. I think I might have another sibling out there somewhere, not just Thomas. Chen considered this new information. An adoption, maybe? It was common in that era for pregnancies out of wedlock to be handled quietly. The babies placed for adoption. That's my guess. My parents married in 1965, so the pregnancy in this photo would have been early in their marriage. If there was a baby girl, and she was given up for adoption. Michael trailed off. You want to find her, Chen said, understanding immediately. She'd be 52 now. My full sister. After losing both parents and discovering Thomas only to lose him immediately, the thought that I might have another family member out there. He shook his head. I need to know. Chen nodded slowly. Adoption records from that era can be challenging to access. Many states had closed adoption policies and records were sealed. But there are avenues, DNA registries, adoption search organizations. I've already submitted my DNA to 3 genetic testing services, Michael said. If she's done the same, looking for biological relatives, then you might find each other, Chen finished. I hope you do. As Michael Holloway left the police station for the final time, journal and photograph in hand, Chen watched him from the window. The Holloway case had revealed how secrets buried for decades could suddenly surface, changing everything those left behind thought they knew about their loved ones, their family history, their own identity. She wondered about this possible sister, this Jennifer who might not even know she was adopted, who might have spent her life unaware of the complex, tragic family she had been born into. Would finding her bring Michael the connection he now desperately needed, or simply extend the web of pain that Marcus Holloway had created with his lies and violence? Only time would tell. But Chen had seen enough cold cases resolved to know that truth, however painful, was preferable to uncertainty. The Holloway family secrets had remained buried for too long, alongside Catherine's body in that makeshift grave. Now, like Catherine, they had been exhumed, exposed to the light, forcing all who encountered them to confront their implications. Burlington, Vermont, October 2020. The coffee shop overlooked Lake Champlain, its large windows framing the expanse of water where early morning mist still clung to the surface. Michael arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a corner table that afforded a view of both the lake and the entrance. He ordered black coffee, then sat watching the door. His stomach knotted with anticipation. The DNA match had come 3 weeks after he'd submitted his sample, a predicted sibling relationship with an estimated 99.6% probability. The woman had responded to his message through the testing service's communication system within hours. Her reply a single stunned sentence. I've been looking for my birth family for 20 years. Her name was Jennifer Reeves, not Jennifer Holloway. She lived in Burlington, just 2 hours from Rutland, had lived in Vermont her entire life without knowing her connection to the Holloway disappearance that had made headlines across the state in 2000. The cosmic irony of their physical proximity despite their lifelong separation wasn't lost on Michael. The door opened and Michael's breath caught. She was his height, with their mother's delicate features and their father's dark hair, now streaked with gray. She paused in the doorway, scanning the room, and Michael raised his hand slightly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither moved, the connection immediate and undeniable. Then Jennifer approached, moving hesitantly at first, then with increasing certainty as she reached his table. Michael? She asked, her voice revealing a hint of the same Vermont accent he had worked to shed during his years in Chicago. He stood, unsure of the proper protocol for meeting a sister for the first time at age 50. Jennifer, thank you for coming. They regarded each other awkwardly until Jennifer broke the tension with a small laugh. This is surreal. I've imagined this moment for so long, and now I don't know what to do. Me neither, Michael admitted. Sit, please. Can I get you coffee? Once they were settled with their drinks, the initial shock gave way to cautious curiosity. You look just like our mother, Michael said. I brought photos if you'd like to see. Jennifer nodded eagerly, and Michael slid an envelope across the table. She opened it with trembling hands, examining each photograph carefully. Catherine and Marcus on their wedding day, the family at Lake Champlain, Catherine in her library, Marcus in his workshop. They're real, she whispered. All these years they've just been abstract concepts. My birth parents, these mysterious people who created me and then let me go. She looked up at Michael. The adoption agency told me it was a private placement, that my birth mother was very young and unmarried. But that's not true, is it? Michael shook his head. They were married in 1965. You were born in 1968, according to the date on that photograph I showed you. I was born 2 years later. Then why? Jennifer asked, the question that had clearly haunted her for decades. Why keep you and give me away? I don't know, Michael admitted. There's nothing in my father's journal that explains it. Just that one reference to wondering where you were, if you knew the truth. Jennifer's expression tightened. Your father's journal. The journal he kept after murdering your mother. My birth mother. Michael winced. Of course she would know about the case. It had been front-page news again when Catherine's remains were discovered. Yes, that journal. I followed the story in the news, Jennifer continued, her voice carefully controlled. When they found her body this summer, I had no idea. No idea I was reading about my biological mother. She shook her head in disbelief. And now to learn that the man who killed her was my biological father. It's a lot to process, Michael acknowledged. Trust me, I'm still struggling with it myself. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared, tragic heritage settling between them. Did you have a good childhood? Michael finally asked. Your adoptive parents, were they kind? Jennifer's expression softened. Yes. James and Margaret Reeves. They were wonderful people. Honest, loving, supportive. Dad was a professor at UVM, Mom a nurse. They told me I was adopted when I was 8. Always made it clear I was chosen and wanted. I'm glad, Michael said sincerely. And you? What was it like growing up with them? Michael considered the question carefully. Happy for the most part. Normal. Dad was quiet but affectionate in his way. Mom was more expressive, always involved in my activities, my education. They seemed to love each other. He paused. Learning about Thomas, my half-brother from Dad's affair, and now about you. It makes me question everything. How much of what I remember was real, and how much was just the facade they presented? Jennifer nodded in understanding. The duality of memory. I've experienced something similar since learning I was adopted. Revisiting childhood moments with this new lens, wondering if certain behaviors or comments had hidden meanings I missed at the time. Exactly. Michael felt a surge of connection with this woman who, despite their lifetime of separation, seemed to understand intuitively what he was feeling. Jennifer took a deep breath. So, Thomas Harrison, he was our half-brother? Yes. Dad had an affair in the early 1970s that produced Thomas. He supported Thomas financially but kept his existence secret from Mom and me. When Mom discovered the affair and threatened to expose him, Michael couldn't finish the sentence. He killed her, Jennifer completed quietly, and Thomas helped him escape justice. Thomas claimed he didn't know it was murder at first, that Dad told him it was an accident. I don't know if that's true. Michael sipped his coffee, now grown cold. Thomas died last month just after I met him. Pancreatic cancer, ironically the same disease Mom had been diagnosed with before her death. Jennifer was shocked to learn that Catherine had been diagnosed with terminal cancer shortly before disappearing, meaning she would have died within months, though surrounded by family instead of alone in a workshop. The tragedy settled heavily between the newly reunited siblings. Jennifer confessed she had begun searching for her birth parents the same year Catherine vanished, a painful coincidence neither could ignore. They discussed the mystery of Jennifer's adoption. Michael suggested their parents had struggled financially when Jennifer was born, or may have disagreed about keeping her. With both parents gone, they accepted they might never know the real reason. Still, Michael expressed his desire to build a relationship with her. After losing his parents and Thomas, discovering he had a sister meant more than he expected. Jennifer agreed, admitting she had always wondered what having a sibling would be like. Michael invited her to Catherine's memorial service, and Jennifer accepted without hesitation, wanting to say goodbye to the woman who had given her life. As they exchanged contact information and stepped outside into the bright October morning, their awkward first hug marked the beginning of a fragile but hopeful new bond. For the first time since learning the truth about his father's violence, Michael sensed a path toward healing. Rutland, Vermont, October 2020. The cemetery was radiant with autumn colors as family, friends, and former co-workers gathered around Catherine Holloway's headstone. The minister spoke of a life once celebrated but long overshadowed by uncertainty. Michael placed a white rose on the casket, whispering a final goodbye. Jennifer followed, honoring the mother she never knew. After the service, Catherine's longtime friend Eleanor approached. emotional but grateful that the truth had finally surfaced and that the siblings had found each other. The memorial closed a 20-year wound, but also opened the door for Michael and Jennifer to rebuild the Holloway family story, not through secrecy and loss, but through connection and truth. Eleanor's emotional farewell left Michael and Jennifer alone at their mother's grave, both processing grief from opposite directions, Jennifer mourning someone she'd never known, and Michael mourning the hope he had carried for 20 years. They discussed their next steps, with Michael planning to return temporarily to Chicago but seriously considering a move back to Vermont. Both wanted to learn more about each other's lives and to rebuild the family that had been fractured decades earlier. Detective Chen approached with a package containing Catherine's old library ID photograph, preserved in evidence since her disappearance. Michael accepted it with gratitude. Before parting, Jennifer invited him to a family dinner the next Sunday, eager for him to meet her children and grandchildren. As he drove away, Michael glanced at the cemetery. Catherine's long journey from missing person to murder victim to restored memory, finally complete. The Holloway mystery was solved, their father's lies exposed, and the siblings could now build something new from the truth that survived. Burlington, Vermont, December 2020. Snow blanketed Jennifer's home as her large family gathered for an early Christmas. Michael watched the lively scene with amazement. After decades with a small Chicago family, he suddenly had nieces, nephews, and grandchildren running through the rooms. Over the 2 months since Catherine's memorial, he and Jennifer had met weekly, sharing their histories and reading Marcus's journal, finding only fragments of the guilt he carried over Jennifer's adoption. Michael's bond with the children grew quickly, especially with Emma, who was fascinated by stories of Chicago winters. His decision to move back to Vermont solidified, and he had already begun the transition. During dinner, Jennifer's husband toasted family found and Catherine's memory, bringing a sense of unity that had been missing for decades. Later on the porch, Jennifer gave Michael a restored 1968 photo of their pregnant mother, taken just before Jennifer's birth. They reflected on the mystery surrounding the adoption, acknowledging they might never know the full truth but choosing peace over bitterness. What mattered now was the family they were rebuilding. Inside, laughter and chaos filled the house as the grandchildren prepared to leave, a reminder that despite the pain left by Marcus Holloway's secrets, the siblings were finally reclaiming a legacy of connection, not tragedy. Michael felt something he thought he'd lost after learning the truth about his father. Hope. Not desperate hope, but a quiet belief in connection and a future where the Holloway name meant more than tragedy. After Jennifer's family left, he realized the Holloway story wasn't over. It lived on in their children and grandchildren, no longer buried, but continuing with possibility. Rutland, Vermont, September 2025. On the 25th anniversary of Catherine Holloway's disappearance, a crowd gathered at the Rutland Public Library for the dedication of the new Catherine Holloway reading room. Michael spoke about his mother's love for books and her years as head librarian. Jennifer followed, explaining that although she never knew Catherine, she had come to understand the woman who gave her life. Together they cut the ribbon to the warm, renovated space. Detective Meredith Chen, now a captain, attended the ceremony, expressing how rare it was for a cold case to end with genuine closure. Later, Michael and Jennifer visited Catherine's grave, reflecting on the 5 years since they reunited. Years that healed some wounds, but left others impossible to fill. They spoke about forgiveness. Michael admitted his anger toward their father had begun to soften after reading his remorse-filled journal. Jennifer agreed that forgiveness didn't erase responsibility, but acknowledged the complexity of their father's contradictions, loving and violent, devoted and deceitful. Jennifer then handed Michael a faded newspaper clipping from 1968 announcing her birth, proof that their parents had once intended to keep her. Whatever forced the adoption had likely broken their mother's heart. Jennifer had made peace with it. She had found love with the Reeves family, and now with Michael too. Leaving the cemetery, they walked toward downtown Rutland where their families waited. Their children and grandchildren, cousins who bonded immediately, were living proof of a reunified legacy. Jennifer wondered what might have happened if Catherine had survived. Michael believed they would have found each other eventually, but acknowledged that the ending they had now held its own meaning. As they approached the restaurant, Michael glanced back at the cemetery hill. 25 years after a fatal blow set everything in motion, the truth had finally surfaced. The Holloway story had become both tragedy and redemption, proof that truth, though painful and delayed, can heal what deception once shattered. Catherine's legacy lived on not only in the reading room, but in the reunited family moving forward together.